Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with Nancy Xu, CEO and founder of Moonhub, an AI recruiting platform that's raised over $10 million in funding. Nancy, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Brett.
No problem. Super excited for this conversation, and let's jump right in. Talk to us about what you're building over there at Moonhub.
Let's do it. Absolutely. So I'm Nancy. I'm the founder and CEO of Moonhub, as Brett mentioned. And at Moonhub, we are building the recruiting interface for AI. So think of it as the world's first AI recruiter and the only one that's currently deployed to hundreds of companies out there in the world.
Take us back to the founding of the company. Did you have a background in recruiting, or how'd you end up here?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my personal background is not in recruiting. Right before Moonhub, I was a computer science PhD over at Stanford in the AI lab, and I was also there for my MBA. And at the time, I was actually working on some of the foundational research and sort of broadly what we call LLMs now, as well as AI agents. And I've always been really excited about this idea of helping people get access to opportunities. When I was at Stanford, I had a bunch of these master students that worked with me, undergrads that worked with me, and other PhDs. And when they went out on the job market, when they graduated, I was so shocked by the kinds of emails they were getting, Brett. I had one student who came to me, he's like, look, Nancy, I'm getting forklift driver job right now in my email inbox. And I was like, there's no way. I'd worked with this guy, we published some papers together. And in the early days of Moonhub, I actually ran a recruiting agency, mostly just helping a lot of sort of Stanford students find jobs. And in the process, I realized three things. The first is recruiting, and especially in the agency world, it's a people business with basically zero technology. And you walk in and you get all these recruiters who get into the profession thinking that they're going to help coach individuals through the most important decisions in their careers. And instead, they spend 90% of their time basically typing away on their keyboards. And so it's a people business, no technology. It's very, very manual. And third part was, I think a lot of what we think about as recruiting today, when you look at it from the lens of someone who sort of has a background in AI like myself, you realize like, wow, the breakthroughs that we're having here at Stanford and LLMs can actually really start to make an impact in building better systems to do recruiting.
Given your background in AI, I'd love to just ask you in general, what do you think about the state of AI today? Could you maybe summarize that for us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It's a very exciting time right now in AI. I think as a founder, there's just so much opportunity to build AI products. The way I think about it is, through human history, we've had maybe 6 or 7 defining technological breakthroughs, right? And people always cite there's fire, there's the wheel, there's agriculture, and you have electricity, and then steam engines, the internet, and now it's AI. And it's so obvious to me that AI is going to be the biggest of all of them. Now, I think the challenge is, I think there's a lot, and I come from this background, right, there's a lot of work that's happening on the research side of AI. And I think now is the time to bridge the gap between what we've done with these large language models and these open models and actually getting real value to users who are able to use these types of products. And I think that will be the most exciting challenge in the next 5 years.
What is it like for you when ChatGPT came out? When was that, like November 2022? Was that like a big moment for people who'd already been in AI? Like, what was that like?
It's an interesting question. Candidly for myself personally, I think a lot of people in AI who've been in more of the research side saw it coming. There are some papers there's one called like DECA NLP, that's ex-Stanford. And then at the time, it was like some people at Salesforce had published about a year or two before, where it was starting to become obvious that you could train a single large language model or a single AI to do many tasks. And that was one of the first papers that showed this. And sort of OpenAI kind of took that one step further, used more data, and made it, instead of doing 10 tasks, you could do any task. And so I think the research was headed in that direction. So when it came out, it was still a wow moment, like, oh, wow, this thing actually scaled. But it wasn't, I think, as surprising as some people imagined. But I will say as a founder, it was very interesting because 3 years ago, I was still in my PhD working on this research, and we were publishing this work on AI models becoming assistants and agents. And then 2 years ago, I started Moonhub. And when we went out to go raise our first round of funding, I still remember going to all these investors and, I'd say things like, oh yeah, we're going to build these AI agents. And at the time, it would just give you a blank stare. What's an AI agent? And then now you walk around and everyone's building an AI agent. So it's quite cool to see how in the last 2 years, so much of this has become mainstream.
It's mainstream when my grandparents are talking about it, like grandparents in general are talking about it. It definitely seems like it's in the mainstream now.
Exactly. Everyone I know, it seems to have tried OpenAI and or tried some version of an LLM, and it's incredible to see.
Now, let's talk about maybe the first 6 months of the company. So, what did the first 6 months look like?
Yeah. So we started the company in the summer of 2022. It's been 2 years now. And the first 6 months were a lot of was a lot about learning the processes and really understanding how recruiters today do their jobs. I think one thing that really sets Moonhub apart from every other sort of AI agent company is that for the first 6 months of our history, we were the recruiting agency. Like I was the recruiter. The first customers we signed, I had signed. The first hire we made, I was the recruiter for those customers, some of the first lines of code. And I think that's given us a really deep understanding of what it actually takes to be a great agency recruiter. And by the way, I keep saying agency recruiter because one of the other realizations we had in the inception of Moonhub is that, a lot of people, when they think recruiting, they think like a recruiter at Google, right? Or like a recruiter at a big company. But the interesting sort of insight we had is that actually most of the spend that these companies are spending on HR is not on sort of software for these internal recruiters at Google, but it was actually paying for services from these recruiting agencies who essentially had all these recruiters on staff. And those recruiters on staff were doing a more limited subset of the work that you traditionally think of recruiters doing. Most of their job is like, find me a great person and make sure they're interested in talking to me. So for the first 6 months of Moonhub, we basically ran an agency and we figured out, you think of it as like AI PhDs and engineers running a recruiting agency and documenting basically every workflow we saw people doing and trying to figure out what were the ones that we could actually automate.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode. And then what were the conversations like when you started to bring it to market? Or maybe just what are the conversations like today? Are people in recruiting open to AI? Are they afraid of AI? Like kind of a mix of both?
I think people are both scared and also excited. I think you talk to most hiring managers and recruiters, and they all know that they have to adopt AI, but they're scared of how they can do it. And, one of the things that Moonhub does that's very different from a lot of other companies is I make the analogy like we sell you a Tesla, we don't sell you a Waymo. So the difference being we have all this great AI technology, but we're going to make it possible for you to use it today before it's fully, autonomous, because we actually have a human recruiter on our team who's actually helping you deploy the AI behind the scenes. So for most of our customers, this makes it much easier for them to trust us to use our product, right? So they come to us and they say, hey, I want to hire this senior software engineer with this background. And we actually have like a human interface, like a human recruiter who is an expert who's going to go help them run that search with the help of our AI. I think if you just deployed a pure AI agent that they chat with, I would bet 90% of those customers would not be willing to do it.
And what's that go-to-market motion look like? How are you attracting and how are you finding customers today?
Today, we have several different channels that customers come in. I would say in the beginning, it's your typical, we start with founder-led sales. Okay, at some point you tap out. Then you have we have benefited a lot from, I would say broadly, just word of mouth and press. A lot of customers who have been very vocal about loving their experience. And so about half of our leads, even to this day, come through half of our customers are sort of inbound leads that come through those channels. And then the other half, we have your more standard sales team that has experience selling these types of products.
And what about marketing? How would you summarize the general marketing strategy and the general marketing approach?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out. We have an amazing marketer on the team. And I would say our approach has been very much more on the brand marketing side than the sort of traditional demand gen marketing. Right. So we don't really run your LinkedIn ads and then Twitter ads and then sort of that kind of marketing. I think we get a lot more from just general brand awareness. I think one very interesting stat about our business is that if you come to Moonhub and you're looking to use a recruiting agency, 90% of the time you're going to become our customer. So for us, it's more about getting the word out there that we exist as an option for them. And we found that brand marketing does a really good job with that. So we do events, talk. We're very focused on not selling. I think it's really important for us, it's not about selling to the customer, but educating the customer. And I think once we educate them, they realize that this is the best option they've got.
What requires the most education?
Yeah, it depends on the person. I think for a lot of people right now, it's just trying to understand where AI can make a difference in recruiting, right? So for them, it's like, okay, let me show you how AI can help you find candidates faster, engage more candidates, get more interested candidates for the same pool of people. So there's a lot of questions around AI, and that's one big piece. We do a lot of education. How does AI make my recruiting better? The second piece is more general education. We have a lot of customers who are sort of early stage startups, like folks who are probably listening to this podcast, Brett. And I think for them, they often come to us with a different goal, which is to just learn about how to be a great hiring manager or how to set up a great hiring machine, basically, as a company. And so we work with a lot of these Sequoia and Dream, et cetera. Pick your favorite fund. When their companies raise money, they'll come to us to hire their first 50 people on their team. And that part of education is a lot more about how do you set up a great interview process? What are you seeing with other people for comp expectation? And more of being almost like a talent advisor for their teams.
Something else you mentioned that I want to ask about is that you have an amazing marketer working with you. How do you find an amazing marketer? A lot of the founders that I work with, founders I talk to, this is a very painful thing for them or a touchy subject. They really struggle to find a good marketer. What did you do and what did you learn from finding that person?
Yeah, I will say my default answer is you should come work with Moonhub and we will help you find that person. We are customers of our own product in the sense that as a company, we don't have an internal recruiting team. Like there is no person on our team whose job is to do internal hiring. Basically, all of our recruiters on staff who work with our customers, they treat Moonhub as another customer for them. So whenever we run a search, we basically dogfood our own product. And that's how we hired our marketers. I wish I had better advice aside from, I do think a lot of recruiting is making sure you just nail a very compelling pitch, being willing to iterate on feedback from how the market responds to the pitch of your company, and then making sure that you're seeing all the candidates that are fit. That's the biggest piece. I think most hiring managers are really only interviewing 5-10% of the people that they should be. And they just don't see the rest.
What did you prioritize for this hire? Were you looking for someone who knew how to market to recruiters, had worked at a recruiting tech company, or someone who'd worked in AI, who could explain the technology? Like, what was that top criteria? 'Cause I think that's the area that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. I can tell you what we prioritized then, and I can tell you what I appreciate now. I would do it again. At the time, I think we prioritized really strongly on finding someone who had sold a similar type of product to the same ICP. So also sold a recruiting product with a services angle to fast growing startups. And there aren't that many companies that do that. And we happened to have found someone who worked at a company that we were close with. And actually, I knew the founder of that company and he gave an amazing reference. And so it turned out to be a great fit. In retrospect, because startups change so quickly, I've come to appreciate a lot more. One is culture fit is super important for us. I'd rather have an A player who's a culture fit than an A plus player who's not. And I think culture fit is important. But the second piece, I've come to just generally appreciate people who have a strong can-do, high agency mentality, who are excited to play wherever the team needs. And that's one thing I really appreciate about our marketer is, for a while she ran our sales team, and she helps with ops and she runs marketing and that's her main thing, but she really can flex in a lot of different spaces.
How do you think about your category? So in the intro, I referred to you as an AI recruiting platform, which sounds like that may work, but it's also extremely broad. Like, what's the category? Is it AI recruiting or what is the category?
Yeah, I would say the category, I think a lot about who are our customers and who we compete with. So we are at the core an AI company that is selling a recruiting agency experience. And what that means is we don't compete with LinkedIn. We don't compete with Workday. We don't complete pick your favorite subscription for recruiters. Those are not our competitors. Well, the people, sort of the companies we compete with are probably companies, I don't know if you, frankly, people on this call have even heard of, but they're the sort of Robert Halfs of the world, the Ronstads, the boutique recruiting agencies of the world. Those are our competitors.
What do they think about you?
I get at least 3 to 5 emails every week from one of these companies asking to license our software.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their U.S. and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
They're not like dunking on AI or trying to like create fear in the market that AI can't be used.
I think it's inevitable. I think even our competitors know that they have to adopt AI. And so it's more about how quickly they can do it. And I think many of them actually come to us thinking that they can buy our software, which, for full transparency, we don't sell software. We sell like AI powered recruiting services. But, I think at some point we may offer them an AI solution for their businesses.
What are those conversations like with investors? Because I feel like maybe 5 or 10 years ago, the idea of like even talking about services would have not been really accepted. But now speaking with investors, that seems to be like the thing they're looking for is like this AI powered service. So how have you seen those conversations shift?
Yeah, for sure. Going back to what I said earlier, right? When we first started Moonhub, you could go to most investors and they had no idea what you were talking about if you said an AI agent. And now I think everyone sort of has this idea of, okay, AI agent, you're trying to build a digital employee, sort of replace like a unit of work. And so I think general investor interest has definitely gone a lot higher between even when we started Moonhub and 2 years in. Like we get a lot more investor interest. That said, we've always been very explicit in only bringing on investors who really understand the business. I think not every investor actually understands what the potential is when you bring AI into basically selling AI as a unit of work and what that business could look like and what scaling that kind of business looks like. But generally, I think everyone is more excited about it.
You mentioned there's misconceptions there. Like, what are those misconceptions about what this is going to look like in the enterprise?
Yeah, I think a few things. One, I think a big part of why services get a bad rep is not because, at the end of the day, what are services? Services are my product is essentially doing a unit of work for you. And I think that itself doesn't get the bad rep. I think the bad rep is like typically the margins are poor and there's a lot of operational complexity to scaling. I think AI will dramatically change that, where we've already seen this with Moonhub. Like our margins are 3x a traditional recruiting agent, right? And the margin story is different. It's actually more like what you might see from a typical SaaS margin. And then the operational complexity goes down because you now have one person doing the job of 5 or 10 people. That's one part of it. And then the other part is, I think the distribution is different. And I don't think everyone understands this. The way we sell our product is very different from how LinkedIn sells LinkedIn recruiters. And it takes a certain level of understanding of the space and sort of just knowing that there is a lot of idiosyncrasies that you learn over time by being in a particular space.
And in terms of go to market, what do you think's been the most important decision you've made so far?
Focusing on verticals one by one, especially inside recruiting. There's always a temptation to build the all-in-one platform. And we've been very explicit about knowing and understanding our customer demographic and focusing. So what does that mean? Like when we first started, all we serviced was basically fast growing early stage tech startups. And, since then we've expanded, but really working closely with that demographic, one, helped us build a very unique brand where now, if you're an AI startup, you're looking to hire, people know about us and they'll come to us. But the other piece is like, it helps to have density in one market before you start to open ones.
How do you decide when it is time to move into another vertical?
For us, it was about customer demand. I think as a company at a very high level, we're very obsessed with the customer. And when customers ask us, hey, they're asking for new verticals, right? They're like, hey, I know we just hired the software engineer, but can you hire my marketer? And then once you get 20 customers asking you the same question, you realize, okay. And there was also a piece which the technology matured enough that we knew we could service those new verticals.
What was the hardest part about moving from selling to startups to maybe non-startups?
This is going to sound funny. I think it actually became easier. I think selling to startups it was easier for us to get those as our early customers because of my personal network and because as a company, we know startups, right? And I still love working with startup customers, but we definitely put in a lot more work for our startup customers than we do for some of our larger enterprises, ironically, because our startups, they require a little bit more hand-holding, coaching on what a good hiring process is. Their searches might change every couple of weeks versus our larger enterprise customers. They come to us and like, find me 20 of the same people. So in some ways, the actual sales process became longer, but the delivery became easier. Like the requirements for the product actually were simpler in some sense, but it was longer to sell into them.
I see. Makes sense. Can you give us an idea of the growth that you're seeing today?
Yeah, so we've been growing revenue quarter on quarter for the last several quarters by 50 to 100% every quarter.
I think any founder that's been on the show or any founder listening in wants to be able to answer that question in the same way. What do you think you've really gotten right? If you reflect on the success that you're having, the growth that you're seeing, I'm sure there's a long list of things there, but like, what would be the big thing that you think you've really gotten right?
Hiring the right people, hands down. Like I wake up every morning, I feel so grateful to work with our team. And, I'm also very grateful that they took a bet on our team, right? I don't think most incredible engineers wake up and they're like, hey, I really want to go work in recruiting. And similarly, I think a lot of great recruiters don't wake up and they're like, hey, let me go work at an agency environment. But the fact that they all sort of see the vision of building a category defining company with AI, I think it's all about the team.
Is this going to have a different category name sometime in the future? I know I'd asked earlier about category, but like long term, 5 years from now, like what is this going to be called? Is this going to be called AI recruiting? Is it just going to be called recruiting? Like, what do you think it's going to be called in the future?
I think it is just the recruiter. If I can illustrate for you the vision here, Brett, I think they're going to start to validate in this industry because of AI. And specifically, the vision is if you're a hiring manager and you need to go hire, a great software engineer tomorrow, you should be able to go to this AI that has already met with 2,000 people in the last 1 hour, and it can tell you exactly who you should interview now and who's most likely to take the offer and who's most likely to be best fit. And it should be able to tell you now. And that is the vision. And I think that we're going to see a lot of consolidation within this industry where it's not like, hey, let me have my internal recruiter do it. And then let me ask 5 other agencies if they're going to take on the search. The vision is we are going to be the AI recruiter. And every time a job opens up, we'll just tell you the best person in the world who should be going to talk to you. And every time a person's available, that person will talk to this AI and the AI will tell them what job they should join.
Final question for you. Let's just talk about priorities. So what's the next 12 months going to look like? What is that top priority that you're really going to be trying to tackle and work on?
Yeah, continuing to obsess over our customers. Like we're now at a phase where the business is growing quickly. Customers love the experience. And so for us, it's about scaling quickly, but ensuring that as we scale quickly, our customers continue to have a great experience.
Amazing. And if there's any founders that are listening in that are saying, yep, I want to partner with you and have you take over our hiring, where should we send them?
Absolutely. If you are hiring or even thinking about hiring, check out moonhub.ai. And then we have an online form. As soon as you fill it out, one of our recruiters will reach out to you.
Amazing. Nancy, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Brett. I appreciate it.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.